Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 884, for the 14th of September 2025. Richard Saunders coming to you from a sunny Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, we're going to be looking at cryptozoology, strange and mysterious creatures reported throughout human history. How likely is it that the world still has mysterious beasts roaming around? Then, after that, it's a review of a TikTok channel by Kate Thomaswho, Pharmacist Kate, who has made a name for herself with common sense, no-nonsense, straightforward science and medicine to combat woo and nonsense. And in this week's show notes at skepticzone.tv, you'll see links to Kate's various outlets on TikTok and Instagram, and I can really recommend that you give those a visit and give her a like. Following that, it's part 2 of our series, Gone and Forgotten, where we look at once popular New Age modalities and devices and so on, and now scarcely heard of anymore. Then we have the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, or the highlights thereof, read by Adrienne Hill. Adrienne's in Portugal at the moment, so that's interesting, and written by our news editor, Dee. Then to round off the show, the Trove segment looks at the paranormal in relation to the year 1965. Happy birthday to you. If you're having a birthday this week, a special happy birthday to you. I noticed that Zach Starkey, Ringo Starr's son, just turned the big 6-0, I think in the last week. Happy birthday to you. Yes, 1965, a very important year for some of us, if you get my meaning. And even those people who maybe used to be the tooth fairy. Well, everybody deserves a happy birthday. Stay tuned. Well, you don't really stay tuned, you just keep listening at the end of the show for more announcements from me. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have a birthday cake in honour of all those people having a birthday. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Cryptozoology. What a word, what a word. And what a fascinating field of investigation it has been for people, well, for centuries. Tales of strange and mysterious animals have been part of human folklore. Longer than centuries, undoubtedly millennia. Cryptozoology, meaning the study of hidden animals, occupies a curious place between folklore, pseudoscience, and the occasional discoveries of once thought of mythical creatures. The field is devoted to the search of beings that are said to exist, but lack good scientific evidence, such as the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, our friend Ben Radford knows only too well, the Yeti, and most famously, I would imagine, the Bigfoot. While zoology relies on observation, classification, and peer-reviewed evidence, cryptozoology thrives on anecdote, blurry photographs, and a sense of mystery. Its history reveals more about human imagination and cultural needs as it does about the creatures claimed to be roaming the world. Modern cryptozoology has its roots in the mid-20th century, where books such as On the Track of Unknown Animals was published. Now, cryptozoologists will often point to the fact that, yes, there have been discoveries made of once thought of extinct animals. The okapi, earlier in the 20th century, the coelacanth in the mid-20th century, and things like giant squids. Animals once thought to be mythical, but later proven real. These cases gave cryptozoology a sort of a veneer of credibility, and they would say that, well, since this creature was found to be real, then maybe the creature I want to be real from mythology or legend is also real. However, as the decades went by, cryptozoology developed more as a subculture than a scientific discipline. Television programs, tabloid news reports, now more online investigations kept interest going, while mainstream science, of course, remains, well, skeptical. The methods employed by cryptozoologists really don't meet the standards of biology or zoology, with reliance on eyewitness testimony being in the forefront. However, there is a lack of good reproducible evidence and a failure to gather physical specimens. Even a clump of hair or a toenail would be a start. Skeptical organizations have long pointed out that despite thousands of reports of Bigfoot, for example, not a bone or a body has been discovered. Nothing we could do a DNA check on to verify that, yes, this is an unknown creature. Given the vast number of hunters and hikers and biologists and explorers and even Bigfoot investigators in North America especially, the absence of hard evidence strongly suggests that these creatures simply are not there. Now, as we said before, there are examples from history where strange creatures have proven to be real. This is a rare occurrence. The likelihood of such things as Bigfoot existing is very small, vanishingly small. Large mammals require a sustainable breeding pool, and also creatures like the legendary Loch Ness Monster. You can't just have one, there has to be a breeding population. If Bigfoot were a species of primate in North America, thousands, or at least hundreds, would need to exist to maintain a genetic diversity. Such a population would leave behind remains, clear tracks, and even be detected through motion-triggered cameras, drones, or satellite imagery. Yet after more than half a century of modern searching, nothing has been found. Most alleged footprints have been admitted hoaxes, easily faked, and the best evidence to date have been the classic blurry photographs or videos. But cryptozoology still remains popular. I think it fulfills certain cultural functions. It taps into our fascination with the unknown and our desire for mystery, our desire to know what's really out there. In some cases, it gives people a community, something to belong to, a shared identity. In the case of the Loch Ness Monster, it's more of an economic driver for Scotland for tourism as it is a folklore tale. The endurance of such things as the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and so on tell us more about the human need for storytelling and the desire to know more about the world and hopefully undiscovered species. But let's run a little thought experiment. What if Bigfoot turned out to be real? Such a discovery would revolutionize biology. The existence of a large, undiscovered primate, presuming it's a primate, in North America and other parts of the world would force a complete re-evaluation of human evolution and migration. It would also completely upend our assumptions about biodiversity and the capacity of modern science to fully catalogue life on Earth. Governments would likely move quickly to protect the Bigfoot and other creatures, triggering debates over conservation versus land use and so on. Would we put these creatures in a zoo? Would we leave them alone? Would we cordon off huge areas so they could roam free, unhindered? It would be seismic. It would validate a century of hoaxes, legends, strange tales, and fringe research, granting cryptozoology a newfound legitimacy. At the same time, skepticism would not disappear. It would shift towards verifying the scope of the species, its behavior, its place in evolutionary history. Popular culture would undergo a renaissance of Bigfoot fascination, no longer confined to tall tales and tabloid headlines. But it would be studied scientifically, with scientific papers being produced. Could we communicate with such an animal? But getting back to the world as we know it, the chances remain extremely remote that these creatures are real. In the main part, cryptozoology, despite all its tall tales and investigations, has yet to deliver the kind of good, solid, verifiable evidence that would move it from the realm of pseudoscience into science. However, it does persist in our society and is a great example of the human need to know more, to question, to wonder, to explore, to discover, although sometimes the lack of evidence is hardly a discouragement. Well, there we go. Cryptozoology, a fascinating field of investigation. And Australia is not lacking when it comes to strange creatures, or should I say, reports of strange creatures. The most notable would be the yowie, which is virtually identical to the Bigfoot in tall tales. And we have had accounts for years and years and years about giant cats roaming around Australia. But of course, despite many reports, it's yet to be shown that these creatures are indeed exotic animals like panthers, and the most likely explanation is that they are feral cats, which can get quite large. Now, I have in my time visited the Pacific West of the United States. I didn't see any Bigfoot. Had a look, nothing there. I've yet to visit Loch Ness, but who knows what I would find if I did that.
Have you done one of those tests that tell you how much feminine energy you have and perhaps you need more masculine and you really need to rebalance it? Put the test down. It's total BS. You can apparently boost your feminine energy by fostering intuition and doing dancing or meditating or painting. You can increase your male energy by setting agendas, having clear goals, and remaining consistent with your routines. I smell BS. Since when is creativity feminine and goal setting masculine? If you feel unbalanced, whatever that is, try getting a bit more sleep, eating a bit better, maybe doing some exercise, working on your critical thinking skills. It's a much, much better use of your time than trying to balance imaginary energies. If you'd like to know more about the brain and why we believe things that are fundamentally unhelpful, then tune into the Why Smart Women podcast. See you soon.
Do I spend too much time on TikTok? Well, probably yes. But in my own defense, I must say I do find it a wealth of information about skeptical topics. Normally fear-mongering, especially when it comes to things like UFOs, or more recently the Comet 3i Atlas, which we covered last week. And TikTok is also full of disinformation when it comes to health matters. No end of health gurus, influencers, and naturopaths giving you questionable advice. And that's being polite. But there is a pearl amongst the swine. And I've discovered Kate from Sydney. Kate is a pharmacist with over 25 years of experience in New South Wales public hospitals. And Kate has decided to take to TikTok and Instagram to battle false and misleading and sometimes dangerous misinformation. Now, I've been so impressed with Kate's output here that I've reached out to her, and I'm pleased to say that she should soon be a guest on the Skeptic Zone to chat about what she does. But before then, I thought I'd whet your appetite. Her TikTok channel is tiktok.com/@prescribe or pass, one word. And I'll link to that in the show notes. Debunking health trends, it says. Sister channel to Debunking Babs, which we'll get into later. So how Kate normally presents her TikTok is she'll play an influencer or a health wellness guru, and she appears as a little insert to make comments along the way. And this one is all about chocolate boosts dopamine.
These 3 foods help to fight depression, and you
Skeptical
probably already have them in your kitchen. Number
All right,
1
let's
is
hear it.
fatty fish, things
Fatty
like
fish.
salmon, also sardines. They have a lot of omega-3s. They can help your brain make serotonin and reduce inflammation that drives depression.
Okay, hang on. Yes, omega-3s are important and low levels have been linked to mood disorders, but they don't magically make serotonin. And the inflammation she's referring to is a chronic systemic inflammation because people with depression have sometimes been found to have higher inflammatory markers.
Number 2 is leafy greens like spinach. They have folate and magnesium, and these are the nutrients that your brain needs to stay calm.
Low magnesium has been linked with mood disorders, and supplements might help if there's a deficiency. And folate helps with methylation, which is a process essential for neurotransmitters. So yes, I guess.
And 3, dark chocolate. Dark chocolate has these amazing
favorite.
compounds that boost dopamine and help your brain feel better and work better.
Look, it's hard to argue that dark chocolate doesn't make you feel better because it's delicious. There's no high-quality study that shows that eating dark chocolate helps or cures depression. It tastes good. You feel good. That's not brain chemistry. That's just chocolate.
So here's what's important. Your gut makes most of the serotonin in the body. So what you eat
back on gut
affects
serotonin.
how you feel. These foods don't just help your mood. They change the chemistry of your brain. What you eat can be powerful medicine for your mind.
Gut serotonin doesn't affect your brain, but that's a whole other conversation. This video is dangerous because there's just enough facts in here to make eating salmon, spinach, and dark chocolate a perfectly cromulent way to fix your depression. Mental health deserves more than oversimplified hacks. Eat well? Absolutely. But let's not pretend that a diet tweak can replace treatment.
So I think that gives you a flavour of how these videos go, and there are dozens of them, which is great to see. Here's another one, and this is all about breast scanning.
Just a little breaking news here for you. Switzerland is the first country to ban mammograms.
So, breaking news, Switzerland hasn't banned mammograms. They still offer them.
Thank God. I always get asked if I do mammograms. No, I don't. Why? I don't want breast cancer. There's a lot of ways to check if you're concerned or you have a high risk.
I've got to say, it's hard to take fear-mongering about radiation damage seriously from someone who has clear radiation damage on their skin, freckles, a tan. If you're so worried about tiny doses of x-rays from mammograms, surely you'd be super worried about the radiation coming from the sun that we know causes skin cancer. For context, every mammogram gives about as much radiation as living on the earth for 7 weeks. Yes, you can sometimes feel a breast lump if it's big enough. The whole point of mammograms is that they can see lumps before you can feel them, so you can have them detected earlier before they get bigger. So unless you have superhero eyes that can see through soft tissue, a mammogram is the best way to pick up something before it gets too big. Honestly, this kind of gaslighting, turning women off proven screening tools is bordering on misogynistic. Women already face enough barriers in healthcare. We don't need influencers turning us away from life-saving tests.
An important message there from Kate. Now, some of Kate's videos are quite funny. She makes funny faces at the camera when she hears nonsense. I think at least one video she has a nice glass of champagne to help her through the outrageous claims she's trying to contemplate. And her other channel is called Debunking Babs, which is at tiktok.com/@debunkingbarbara, which is the full title. And this is the disgraced Australian naturopath Barbara O'Neill, where she looks at some of her content, and Barbara O'Neill has a huge amount of content on online, various outlets. And here's a typical look from Kate at some of the claims of Barbara O'Neill.
So for the sore throat, you finely slice the onion into a few slices.
Slicing into slices.
And then you put this sliced onion on the...
What are we doing?
On the cloth.
Are we juicing?
And you fold the cloth over and then fold it back over.
We're making juice?
And then that will go around the throat like that.
Is she making an onion necklace? Brilliant.
And then you can wrap a scarf around it, nice woolly scarf.
To hide the fact that you're wearing an onion necklace.
And it'll bring relief to the sore throat.
How? Nothing kills the mood like snuggling into the neck of your beloved and finding out they're wearing an onion necklace, but that's beside the point. This is likely an extension of centuries-old beliefs that onions could draw out illnesses. In the Middle Ages, people would place onions into rooms to absorb infections. Spoiler, it didn't work. Can we just think logically for a second about how many layers there are between the front of your throat, where you're placing the onion, and where the inflammation is, which is back here near your tonsils? Skin, fat, muscles, larynx, trachea, thyroid gland, blood vessels. So whatever's meant to be happening in the onion has got a long way to travel. In medieval times, they thought bathing made you sick, so maybe not the best reference point for your wellness routine. My hot tip, try an analgesic or an anti-inflammatory. It gives less Tony Abbott.
A wonderful takedown there of some of the outrageous quackery from Barbara O'Neill. Well, there we go, and I will link to both her channels, Debunking Barbara and Prescribe or Pass, in this week's show notes. I strongly suggest you have a look. It's funny, it's knowledgeable, and it's vital. It's vital there's somebody there on TikTok and other outlets taking to task all the outrageous and ridiculous claims, especially from the Wellness Brigade. And again, we hope to have Pharmacist Kate on the Skeptic Zone in the very near future.
Hallo aan alle Nederlandse luisteraars. Op dit moment bent u aan het luisteren naar de Skeptic Zone, voor wetenschap en kritisch nadenken. Voor meer informatie ga naar www.skepticzone.tv.
Now let's continue with part 2 of Gone and Forgotten from the pages of the Skeptic magazine, which is volume 45, number 2, from June-July this year. And the feature is called Gone and Forgotten. Richard Saunders looks back at those claims that didn't last the distance or cut the mustard. Over the years of skeptical inquiry, and after quite a few visits to the regular Mind, Body, Spirit exhibitions, we have come across many claims of pseudoscience and the paranormal. At the time, members of the public and members of the media gave them credence beyond what they deserved. Some have stuck around, even prospered, UFOs and psychic powers to name two. But many more have died the death of irrelevance and fast fashion. Some might still be around, but only as a vestige of their once high-profile status. Others truly are forgotten. So who cares about these historical discarded artefacts? Well, we do, if only in the interests of historical discourse, and as a warning to watch the skies for the next meteoric rise and fall of this month's unconvincing trend. Here are some. 12-strand DNA activation. Claim. Humans have dormant spiritual DNA strands that could be reawakened through vibration crystals or light codes. Status. Brief internet popularity, now mostly regarded as pseudoscientific and fringe. Crop circles. Claim. Crop circles were divine geometric messages created by extraterrestrials or earth energies. Meditating on their shapes would bring enlightenment. Status. Popular in the 1980s and 1990s, now faded from memory and considered hoaxes or novelty spiritual relics, particularly following revelations by very earthly circle makers and increasingly complex designs obviously made courtesy of mathematical skills and GPS. Crystal healing, as originally taught in the 1970s. Claim. Specific geometric layouts of crystals could align chakras, alter reality, or summon spiritual guides. Status. Crystals are still trendy, but the elaborate metaphysical systems of the 1970s have mostly been dropped. ESP. Claim. A vague term, extrasensory perception, was a coverall for any paranormal claim concerning mind-reading or psychic insights. Status. The term is no longer used as the term psychic replaced it over the past decades. Needless to say, no claim of ESP ever stood up under proper investigation. Etheric weavers and Lemurian healing tools. Say that 6 times quickly. Claim. Special rods or pendulums channeled from Atlantis or Lemuria could manipulate unseen energies for healing. Status. Once heavily marketed, now very niche and generally viewed as symbolic or decorative. Face on Mars. Claim. Certain features of the Martian landscape, as shown in low-resolution photographs from the 70s and the 80s, were in fact giant buildings, carving, and statues, including that of a face looking up into space. Status. Better and higher resolution images from Mars orbiters in recent decades revealed these features to be nothing more than natural geographic formations. Firewalking. Claim. Putting oneself into a trance or meditative state could result in the ability to withstand the burning effects of red-hot coals, proving mind over matter. Status. Long since debunked by an understanding of the physics of heat transference and conductivity, and aided by spectacular failure of firewalking gurus to walk more than a few meters before jumping off the coals, suffering burns to the soles of their feet. Graphology, also known as handwriting analysis. Claim. One's characteristics and personality could be determined by the way one forms words and letters when writing. Status. Although still being used, its popularity has decreased markedly in the last 2 decades. The concept is based on pseudoscience and does not stand up to testing. Harmonic convergence, 1987. Claim. A global spiritual awakening through mass meditation and celestial alignment would begin on August 16th to 17th, 1987, when an unusual alignment of the planets occurred. Status. A major event at the time, now mostly remembered by niche spiritual historians. Kirlian photography. Claim. The aura or spirit energy of plant leaves could be captured even after a section of the leaf or part of the plant was cut away. Status. Claims debunked after scientific testing, now largely forgotten apart from some New Age devotees. Light and sound machines. Devices with flashing lights and binaural tones could induce altered states, psychic experiences, or healing. Status. Rebranded into wellness tech, but early ascension devices are mostly obsolete. Loch Ness Monster. Claim. A large, possibly prehistoric sea creature lives in Loch Ness in Scotland and occasionally makes appearances. Status. No convincing trace of such an animal has ever been found after decades of searching, but the legend makes the loch a popular tourist destination. And finally for this week, negative ion generators. Claim. Popular in the 1980s, These were electronic devices designed to release negatively charged ions into the air. These ions were believed to improve air quality and enhance well-being. Status faded from popularity and seldom heard of today. Health benefits claimed were not demonstrated. The generators basically just created static and attracted dust. Many versions were pyramid-shaped to add some dubious New Age prestige. Well, there we are. That's part 2 of our 3-part series of Gone and Forgotten. And in the final part next week, we'll be looking at such things as Nostradamus, psychic surgery, rebirthing, and spoon-bending.
ただいま聞いていただいているポッドキャストはオーストラリアからザ・スケプチックゾーンという科学と論理のポッドキャストです。英語は世界中で数ある言葉の一つですが、このポッドキャストはいろいろな国の言葉で紹介します。www.skepticzone.tv を調べてホームページの下までにスクロールすると折り紙のピガサスという翼のある豚を工夫したリッチャード・ソーンダースのオリジナルの折り紙のポスターをダウンロードをすることができます。
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill here in picturesque Portugal, and I'm going to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. This is newsletter number 230. And don't forget, you can sign up to this newsletter at skeptics.com.au and get the full report, complete with all the links every other week, right into your inbox. But now, let's see what our news editor, Dee, has for us this time. Hi all, says Dee. Our annual skeptical convention nears. Tickets for Skepticon 2025 are on sale now, and they're held in Melbourne this year on the weekend of October 4th through 5th. We look forward to seeing our favorite speakers and attendees. The winner of the bent spoon will be announced at the convention. Nominations close soon, so propose your preferred perpetrator of piffle now. Meanwhile, the Victorian sovereign citizen manhunt and rural, quote, people's courts of common law, end quote, have certainly brought the ideology front and center in the court of public opinion. Time will tell how these affect perceptions on what used to be a political oddity. Articles this fortnight are primarily in the media watchdog category of misinformation, with many outlets promoting shonks, quacks, and otherwise phony claims. It is, however, a relief to be bombarded with sillier stories about ghosts, UFOs, and killer dolls. In the meantime, read on. Dee. Okay, Dee, I'll do just that. Sovereign citizens prove they are more dangerous than simply risible. With the murder of 2 police officers in Victoria in the news, sovereign citizens have had a lot of coverage recently. Proven to be more than a figure to be mocked, the rise of this ideology as being above the law is far more concerning. A heated Senate hearing in the U.S. RFK Jr. claims that mRNA vaccines kill people. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said in a Senate hearing that mRNA vaccines cause death and that he doesn't know how many Americans have truly died from COVID-19 and its resulting vaccine hysteria. Florida Congresswoman believes UFOs are interdimensional beings. In case you needed more of a reason to groan at American politics, Florida Congresswoman Anna Pollina stated in an interview that she believes that UFOs are evidence of travelers from other dimensions. It's bad enough that they're not from this universe. Why do they have to be from a different plane of existence? Harvard scientist claims he can prove God. The laws of physics are, quote, too precise, end quote. The God question has taxed humanity for millennia, but one Harvard scholar believes he has the silver bullet. Quote, a small shift in any of these laws could have made galaxies, planets, and life impossible, end quote. Feels like he's putting the assumption that life must exist first before the possibility that it could not. Former psychic warns Dr. Oz's medical practices are spiritually dangerous. Does former psychic mean that they've lost their mental ability or simply gotten tired of putting up the shtick? Are there recovering psychics? Or is this the pot calling the kettle black? I'm bemused. TikTok, worth watching. Sydney pharmacist Kate gives it to the wellness misinformers. Head to www.tiktok.com/@prescribe or pass and enjoy. Kate will be a guest on the Skeptic Zone in the near future. Items of interest. Featured story. The doll didn't do it. The coroner reveals that the late paranormalist Dan Rivera wasn't murdered by a Raggedy Ann doll. He had a history of heart conditions and cardiac events. Lots and lots of outlets are publishing this story. It's about a doll, for heaven's sake. Travel tips. Haunted hotel for sale. In Greensboro, North Carolina, there is a real estate opportunity that's just too good to miss. A rumored haunted house, the Biltmore Hotel, is on the market for those with money to burn. Good luck getting a poltergeist past the inspectors. Note, this is not one of the glamorous 5-star Biltmores scattered around the world. It's a lot more modest, but at least it has ghosts to keep you company. Silliest story of the week. American artist turned psychic turned CIA superweapon? Popular Mechanics, a once respected scientific publication, continues to discredit itself by publishing such swill. Indigo Swan is a painter who enacts spooky action at a distance by altering magnetic fields in an underground facility with the power of thought. Who writes this stuff? Better yet, who believes it? Ooh, the really silliest story of the week. What pets would say to you in a letter? I'm guessing mine would say, "Where's the treats?" Assuming they could hold a pen, dogs would like to talk with you if you'd just put the phone down. All sorts of messages, but for some reason, no mention of walkies or "I need to go to the toilet real bad" or "what about treats?" Oh dear. I'm hoping my puppy misses me, that's all I can say. Because right now, we're in Portugal. And while we were on a tour from Lisbon to Sintra, I noticed a road sign indicating an exit to Monsanto. My first thought was that the chemical company known for its genetically modified plants and other things had a significantly large office in Portugal, large enough to have a whole road sign at its own exit. Then I recalled that the company was now Bayer, but fleetingly thought maybe in Europe. They are still known as Monsanto. Then I started coming to my senses and thought maybe it was something else, and sure enough, the latter turned out to be correct. Monsanto in Portugal is an historic village known as, according to the BBC and other sources I found, the most Portuguese village of Portugal, since it was voted that title in 1938 in a national contest. Monsanto, which means Holy Mountain, has a population under 1,000 and sits atop a mountain where homes are built between, on, and under granite boulders. The giant rocks sometimes serve as walls and other times as roofs for the residents' homes. And it is listed as one of 12 official historic villages of Portugal. So my next question was, did the company name come from this village somehow? And the answer, it seems, is yes. The company's name came from the founder's wife's maiden name, and she was a prominent member of the Monsanto family, whose name, according to Wikipedia, was derived from this mountainous village in Portugal. Thanks, or obrigada, for listening. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Portugal, signing off.
Allora ciao, io mi chiamo Professore Dave, io ti voglio insegnare tutte le cose sulla scienza. Parliamo di fisica, di chimica, biologia, astronomia, matematica e tante altre cose. Guardami su YouTube, arrivederci. Hey everyone, this is Professor Dave. I want to teach you about all kinds of things regarding science. I want to tell you about physics. I want to tell you about chemistry, biology, astronomy, math, and many, many more things. Come check me out on YouTube. The channel is called Professor Dave Explains. Take it easy.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave Explains.
Now it's time once again to go back to the digital archives from around the world, those newspaper archives, normally at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, but lately we've been checking out Google newspapers online. And Google have an interesting, quite a wide selection of newspapers you can search. And this week I thought we'd combine a couple of terms, paranormal and the year 1965, just to see what we get. Now, 1965, as far as I'm concerned, was a very important year indeed. I'm sure there are other people out there listening who would agree. Anyway, let's have a look. 2003, on the 14th of March, and this is the Beaver County Times. Where is that? Where is that? Sometimes it's hard to pin down exactly where these newspapers come from, especially if they don't put on their masthead exactly where they are, but we can figure it out, I'm sure. And this is being rather difficult for me to find out exactly where this newspaper is published. You'd think it would be clear on the top. There's a weather forecast here. Maybe that will tell me. Oh, and the weather tells me, the weather map tells me this looks like it's from Albany or Boston or that area. Okay. And the headline here is Paranormal Explorers Come to Gettysburg. Gettysburg, Associated Press. The second annual Pennsylvania Paranormal Conference drew ghost hunters from all over the state to Gettysburg, a small community known for its famous Civil War battle, and the ghosts, some say, still haunt the battlefields. The weekend conference, which about 160 people came to attend from as far away as California, is the brainchild of Pennsylvania Ghost Hunters Society founder Rick Fisher. Quote, There's a lot of paranormal things going on in the state, end quote, he said. Speakers at the conference urged attendees to use a fair amount of skepticism, but they also described many eerie occurrences that have been reported. Among them are numerous Bigfoot sightings, particularly in a section of western Pennsylvania called Chestnut Ridge, an alleged UFO crash in Kecksburg, Westmoreland County, in 1965. There we go, there's a reference. Hauntings throughout the state, and vampire cults in New Hope, Bucks County. Quote, I don't in any way doubt there is phenomena, end quote, said attendee Catherine Ramsland, a clinical psychologist and forensics professor at DeSales University. Quote, but I don't think it's anywhere near as much as some would like to think. There's a lot of wishful thinking out there, end quote. Kimberly Calnis doesn't need convincing. She lives in an old home in Kataskuiqua. Without going too much into that, I've found that's a borough in Pennsylvania, and I would only imagine that's a Native American name. And apologies for mispronouncing that, which I undoubtedly did. And believes clanging pipes. Single, she has a spectral housemate. She said plumbers have checked the pipes but found no cause for the clanging. Quote, I'm a believer, end quote, she said. Jean Mollack of Allentown believes perceived supernatural events could have a more natural explanation. Quote, I believe witnesses who see things definitely see something, end quote. Mollack said as she examined a table of plaster casts from alleged Bigfoot prints found in Pennsylvania. Quote, but I believe a lot of hauntings can be caused by magnetic fields of electrical field disruptions, end quote. Fisher, a former warehouse worker who left his job after 25 years to run ghost tours, published a magazine and lectures on the topic, said he became interested in the supernatural at age 7 when he saw a ghost in the hallway of his grandparents' house. Other family members later admitted seeing the same man, and Fisher's grandfather told a family member shortly before his death in 1982 that he frequently saw his own father's spirit in the house. Fisher said photographic, video and audio evidence shows there is something on the other side, but he has also seen photographs he says are not legitimate. Quote, everything we know about ghosts are really just theories, end quote, he said. Quote, we don't know the answers, end quote. And next we have from the Toledo Blade, dated the 14th of April 1982, we have a story I think I must have covered before when we were talking about James Randi, who appears quite often in these archives. However, I will read the appropriate paragraph. And the story is about James Randi, spoon-bending, mind-reading, psychic healing, unexplainable psychic phenomena, no easily explainable bunk, flimflammery and fraud, according to James Randi, founder of the International Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. And it goes on about James Randi, but the paragraph here says, since 1965, Randi has offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who can demonstrate paranormal powers under specific terms. More than 600 people have tried to win the money, but no one has. Randi does not expect that anyone will. To prove his confidence, Randi duplicated several reputed paranormal events. He bent and even broke spoons, correctly predicted which word out of a 300-word newspaper column a man in the audience would select when asked, and performed so-called psychic surgery without medical tools or anesthesia. And the story goes on. But as I say, I'm almost certain that we have read this report before, which is a general overview of what James Randi was doing in 1982, only 2 years after his famous water divining experiments here in Sydney. Another report here in a journal or a newspaper called The Hour from the 31st of October 2003, which lists horror movies. Grab a good old horror movie or Gorefest DVD tonight. And there are many listed here, including Die, Die, My Darling from 1965. And as I scroll through the list of returns here for my search, there are even more that reference James Randi and the fact that he began his challenge in 1965. Now here's a story from the Montreal Gazette dated the 5th of March 1977. Images of dead on film. Psychic photography has been around as long as the shutter and the lens, but not many photographers get the image of a dead person in the middle of a family portrait. Even fewer people are aware that it has ever happened. The Veilleux family of Waterville, Maine, certainly didn't know about it when they began to get strange images on the prints of their Polaroid camera. In fact, they were more interested in snowmobiles and having fun when their first Polaroid experiences started to happen 12 years ago. It began with some idle fooling on a Ouija board during a family evening in 1965. Quote, "We were having fun with the planchette," and of course the planchette is the little piece that you move around the Ouija board, "asking it silly questions like most people do when they get hold of one," end quote, said Fred Veilleux. Here with his brother Richard and his father Joseph to speak at the International Symposium of Life, Death and Psychical Research, Fred admits the family didn't know very much about paranormal things. Quote, "Suddenly we were contacted by a spirit out of the body who called herself Anne Carroll Lowe," end quote. He said during an interview. Quote, "She said she had evidence that she had survived bodily death," end quote. Armed with the date of birth and death of this being had given them, the Veilleurs began looking in a cemetery near their home. They soon found the tombstone of a woman by that name who had died September 14, 1835. Since then, with the help of ACL, as they call her, the family has been in touch with hundreds of beings who claimed to have survived death. Through the automatic writing of their Ouija board, the Veilleurs discovered some of the beings wanted the family to try picking up their images on film. They decided on a Polaroid camera to eliminate the possibility of tampering when the film was processed and being snapped. And I'll just break in here to say, I remember Joe Nickel would lecture or wrote about making impressions on Polaroid camera film. Until 3 years ago, the family had recorded hundreds of paranormal images on film. By searching through family albums and state archives, the Veilleurs claim they have identified several of the images they photographed. While psychic photography has attracted its fair share of charlatans and fakes, some of the earlier photographers were caught tampering with their film, the Veilleurs' work has been examined by several researchers who declared it authentic. Quote, "Nobody would ever say these paranormal things can't be faked or altered on the film," end quote, says Fred. Quote, "We have tried to use as many controls as possible to eliminate that chance," end quote. But the fact remains the Veilleurs family has been taking some strange pictures in the last decade. And that story dates from 1977, so I wonder if there's any trace of those still around. And finally, we'll end with a letter to the editor from the News Dispatch dated the 23rd of March, 1970. And this comes to us from Pennsylvania. "Dear Sir, flying saucers are found to be no threat to this polluted world. A great scientist who for 20 years investigated unidentified flying objects, UFO, for the United States Air Force said he first thought of UFO as hogwash, but not anymore. Neither is he with the Air Force anymore." On December 10th, 1969, Oregon Journal quoted him as saying, quote, "It is important to continue the scientific studies of UFO. Let's not shove it under the carpet," end quote. Now, who would do a thing like that? The Air Force did stop investigating, but they will never stop watching. If the Air Force did admit UFO over the United States, this would also admit Russia could be flying over the US. Don't blame the Air Force. This is a worldwide problem, and Russia has the same problem. Flying saucers, or Bludzas, Bludzas, brought on a religious revival in Almaty, Russia in September 1965. If UFO are of God, to wake a world gone mad, we sure blew it again. Perhaps it took 23 years of investigating UFO to decide the only answer to the supernatural performance of the UFO are, yes, supernatural, which would come under spiritual study, not Air Force. But the far-out cults and some spiritual leaders frighten many from accepting the signs and wonders which God said He, not Satan, will show in heaven above. Acts 2:19. In Luke 21:28, Jesus said, quote, "When these things begin to come to pass, then look up," end quote. Yes, look up and start wondering about our own redemption before trying to change everybody else, when only Christ can change anybody. But man by his own choice will let Satan deceive the whole world by the only way Satan can, and that is man deceiving man. Signed Leo Bach. And it's got his address here. Well, since this is 1977. 744 South, I presume, 4th Street, Coos Bay, Oregon. So one wonders if it's Satan flying around in the UFOs. Or maybe he was in Russia in 1965. Who knows? The devil in a UFO boggles the mind. But lots of things boggle our mind when we go to the digital archives at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, that superb Australian resource. Or, as we do quite frequently, we look at Google Newspapers. All you have to do is type in Google Newspapers in your search and up it comes. Because when you go there, well, you never know what UFOs and other paranormal things you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone at PayPal or Patreon. Thank you to those new people who've just come on board. Every cent helps to keep the show going, and it's much appreciated. The show is now in its 17th year, something like that, and we're heading to, I think, in January, our 900th episode. Now, here's a note from our friend Stephen Bavaro, who you've heard on the show before. He's also been a speaker at the Skepticon. Oh, by the way, don't forget to get your tickets for Skepticon in Melbourne coming up in October. You can do that at skepticon.org.au. Head for the show notes for that link. But Stephen Bavaro, who loves to talk about such things as archaeology, digging up the ancient things, he has let me know that he is taking part in Run for Autism. And this is his first year of doing it. And what a worthy cause that is, raising money to help in that research. And I will add a link to the show notes if you want to cheer on Stephen Bavaro by helping to sponsor his run. And a quick look at his page tells me that he's well on the way to reaching his goal, so maybe you can help get him over the line. Coming up on next week's show, I hope to bring you an interview with Kate Thomas, who you heard earlier on in this week's show, and her experiences in taking on the merchants of woo and so on, and bad thinking on TikTok. Also part 3 of our series Gone and Forgotten, and in the Trove segment I think we're going to be looking at Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were known as psychic investigators, demonologists, so on. The Conjuring movies are based on their supposed exploits. But before I go, I'll give a special shout out to the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet and her friend Michelle Bickersma, because between the two of them each week they review the written version of the show, the contents, and make sure that I haven't made any silly errors, which I normally do. Thank you, you two. What you do for me is really important and I really appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, that's Michelle you hear occasionally when I run the promo in Japanese. And that promo is telling you to go to the Skeptic Zone homepage, scroll to the bottom, where you can download free origami posters by yours truly. There we are, the cat's out of the bag for this week. But until next week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.